Melvin Conteh on the Iron Mindset podcast. Finally getting some of the City Gym boys up here.
Let's go.
I had my first question for you. The first place I really wanted to start is because the first time I heard about you was when you worked in flight for Drumcondra. Yeah. But in the research for the podcast, I naturally seen that you have had this training history very long prior to that. What was the moment? Like, where was it? Was it something in your childhood? Have you always been sporty?
So, I guess to start it, I was a fat kid.
Okay.
I was like, let's say 10, 11, 12. I love like chicken, beef, rashers. My whole diet when I was younger was mostly protein by accident. I think that's where my baseline of strength came from. But I was just sitting at home on my ass playing video games all day. One day my mom was like, "You're going to rugby, and that's it. It's not even your decision." Mm-hmm. Started rugby, ended up being pretty good at it. I loved it. I loved going from this like fat, chubby kid to like, oh, he's a strong fella on the team. He's a big, strong lad. I even remember some matches, this back in Connacht and Roscommon to be exact. I was in a rugby match and I heard the guys on the other team be like, "Watch out for the big, strong Fijian guy." And they was assuming I'm some kind of islander. But yeah, so played rugby and then through rugby, I got into the gym. And then we started doing Connacht trials. Mm-hmm. I got into under 17s or 16s Connacht B team and loved the gym, loved weight training. I was going to the gym like 5-6 days a week. If you scroll through my Instagram page, I go all the way down. I was like shredded at like 82 kilos. And then through rugby, I was finding that I just wasn't as competitive as the other guys. Mm-hmm. Like the other guys were faster, they're more technical, whatever. But I was winning in the gym and I was happy out with that. Then one day, one of the coaches come to me and they're like, "You need to gain another 10 kilos if you want to be like an 18 prop." And I was like, not a chance. Like, I just got these abs. I'm loving life.
Yeah, you were shredded. I've actually seen that series of pictures you posted. And it's crazy for me to think that you would say that when you were younger, you were heavy, just a kid that played video games and things like that. And then all I saw was this like jacked 18-year-old.
Yeah, it was a mad transition. And yeah, so then through the rugby, I left rugby after that when they told me I had to gain 10 kilos. It's like, not a chance. Went into full-time gym and then went to college. Not college. I went to a PT Academy to do my personal training course. And it was there where I found out about powerlifting. I was benching one day and one of the guys in the course was like, "That was just an AIPO bench record. Like, we need to get you into a comp." I was like, why not? Why not? Like, I love lifting weights and there's a sport for it now because I didn't know about beforehand. So did my first AIPO push-pull comp. Didn't even notice there was such a thing as commands. I don't know if it's on my Instagram, but on my first attempt, I unracked the weight and I'm holding it. And he's like, "Oh, you can go when you want." Because actually in the APO, there wasn't a start command. You just go, you just do it. But I remember in that comp, and there was two things that made me fall in love with powerlifting and weightlifting. The first thing was, I broke the national record on like my second attempt, and I missed my third. I had a number in mind I wanted to hit, and I went back to the warm-up area and I was bawling, crying. I was devastated, and they're like, "Why are you crying? You broke the national record. Like, you did great." And I was like, "I didn't hit what I wanted, so I need to come back again and do it again." The second thing was, I overheard guys chatting, and they were saying, "Man, did you see Damien Nam's most recent comp? It was crazy. He killed it." I was like, that's what I want. I want to be in another county altogether and people are talking about how good my lifts are, you know? So those two things is what gave me the powerlifting bug. I have to keep going to hit the numbers I want, regardless of whether it's national champion or world champion. I want to hit the numbers I want whilst achieving those things still. And I want to be talked about in the community. So that's why I'm still here today.
So let me ask you a couple. That's like, thank you for like abridging your entire like the last like story. 8 years of your life into this like 4-minute section. But let me ask a couple of questions then. So naturally, as a kid, were you that kind of kid? Rather than kicking the ball around the field, you'd rather play games?
Oh yeah. if I could today, I'd still be playing video games all day. But of course, I have to live the adult life. I'm a big gaming nerd. I love like Stardew Valley, Fallout New Vegas, all these games that maybe half the listeners don't know about, you know?
Listen, it's powerlifting,
Yeah.
right? I've had this conversation here before. For a lot of people, powerlifting is their first sport ever. They've never been interested in anything else. And it's one of the beauties of the sport. Anyone can kind of do it. So I would say there's a decent cohort of people that probably know the games you're talking about. So this is actually something I talked to Cillian O'Connor on the podcast about recently. Do you think there's an element of it, right? You know, in like a lot of games, you have a character and you level up and you have stats and like you gain strength or dexterity or stamina. Do you think there's like almost an element of that with the gym where you're like leveling up your own game?
100%. Even before I started powerlifting or sports, there was a game I used to play. It's called Assassin's Creed Black Flag. We had your own pirate ship, and there's international leaderboards where other guys had their own ships. I remember when the game came out, I got onto the top of the leaderboard, and I screenshot. I was top of the leaderboard in like the Irish ranks, and I was chuffed for myself. I was walking around on cloud nine, you know, and I think that idea from games of like maximizing your character, maximizing your stats, like when you do one training session, your stats get a boost. That's definitely a carryover into powerlifting for me.
Okay, then which was the bigger achievement? All right, the AIPO bench record, or being top of the leaderboard in the Irish ranks for Assassin's Creed Black Flag?
I'm gonna say the Assassin's Creed Black Flag. It needs, so if I had like let's say Barry Pickett's record, that's something where I'd be like, oh, I've topped it, you know?
Yeah, okay, well, fair enough. I suppose given that you have, in the long term, you switched to the Irish PF, that's fair to say. So what was there a point though with the play, like you were playing rugby, you're obviously decent enough, like you're a stocky guy, you have big shoulders, you're obviously decent, but it got to that stage where it was either, as you said, your coach wants you to gain an extra 10 kilos, but you had started in the gym at this point. So was it that you were like, well, I actually kind of enjoy lifting way more than I do tackling lads and throwing a ball backwards?
Oh yeah, I was so soft. I hated being in the rain during rugby matches. I hated being on the ground covered in muck and constantly getting injured as well. I had this habit where when the guy was running towards me, instead of wrapping around him, I'd put my hands up. The wrists would go back. I fractured both my wrists like a few times. So yeah, when I heard there's a sport that I'm good at and still has an international route and I can be indoors, I was like, oh, I'm all for it. Win, you know? And now like there's even the team element coming back into it, you know, with like, I love like the club point system and comps, like the Irish team, all that. So I'm getting everything I wanted from sports without it being rugby, where I thought maybe my chances of that were done. Powerlifting came into my life. And I think a lot of elite powerlifters had the same experience. A lot of them have come from other sports where it didn't work out, and now they found this new avenue.
For sure. Like I had Ben Harrison on, and he had a rugby background. When we were away in Iceland for Western Euros, I got to know and became great friends with Beck Phillips, who an under 93 lifter. Same, he played a lot of rugby. Now he does powerlifting strongman. So there's definitely, I think rugby's probably just one example, but I would agree. Like I used to do pro wrestling.
Yeah,
not that we could say that that's a real sport as such, but still, I think powerlifting is that natural progression for people where you want to be good at this thing that, let's be honest, powerlifting, you could put a couple of hours to it a week and be decent, but like yourself, you could put some serious time into it, become one of the best in the country. And I think that's kind of the beauty of it. Like we talked about prior, and we will get into as we progress. You've got those like 3 types of powerlifters. We'll get there though. But what was there a switch over mentally for you? Because you said you went from being a little bit of a heavy set kid, then you did get like, and I've seen the picture, and I would encourage everybody watching, go look at Melvin's Instagram, because he's got one picture and you're shredded to bits, like beach body ready. Get this man on a bodybuilding stage. You were very, very lean. Was there a switch over then you were like, I actually care more now about becoming as strong as possible?
Yeah, I find myself thinking about that recently. I remember when I started powerlifting, I was still really shredded, like 80 kilos, 83 kilos. I think the first comp I did was under 83s, and I did my first Irish PF comp because someone said to me, man, Irish PF's where it's at. That's where the big meets are at, not AIPO. And I wanted to cut into my first powerlifting comp, and I always had this mindset, the fatal mistake. And I had this mindset of I want to be like a shredded powerlifter. I want to be like the hybrid, and like that's similar to like what Russell Orr's doing.
Yeah.
But again, he's a crazy outlier. So I showed up to my first comp, and 2 weeks out, I was like, actually, I can't do this. I can't keep cutting. And I ended up going as a guest lifter at like 89 kilos, trying to do the 83 kilo class. And from then onwards, I was like, I can't keep cutting because I'm not getting stronger. And I don't even want to be a bodybuilder. So I'm not going to be this in between of I'm not a good bodybuilder, I'm not a good powerlifter. And I think at some point you have to make that sacrifice. And there's still like something aesthetic about being a big, bulky, strong dude,
For sure, man.
You don't need to be like super shredded 6-pack and like your veins are showing and all that. I think a guy like a big shoulders, big quads, whatever, but also squatting 300 kilos is equally as impressive as the summer bod, if not even more so in some cases.
I think that's like that critical point for a lot of people because like, say even for yourself, like I know now you've gone from, as you said, you were trying to compete under 83, now you compete under 105.
Yeah.
And it's probably like quite a stark contrast to the coach trying to get you to gain 10 kilos. Like, nah, I'm not going to do this. He sees you powerlifting now under 105 going, that bastard. That bastard's so big now. But like, you're big, you're jacked, you're a big fucking muscular guy. Like, so I don't think, and that's the thing, I think especially when we look across, and it's one of the things I love about the sport now, I think there's a much greater cohort of people that are embracing the idea that, one, your body weight is not necessarily indicative of your health, but also you can be a big, strong person. It doesn't mean you have to go all the way to the other element of like, you've seen some of the untested guys. I've had Jake Brennan, Eamon Hartford in here. We've talked about like pushing into like morbid obesity, but at the same time, your health is not necessarily defined by how many visible abs you have either.
No.
So it's like there's that happy middle ground where you can be a fantastic level powerlifter, but still have a healthy body composition, be a functional member of society. You can put your socks on and tie your shoelaces.
Yeah, for sure. Like there's even been times where I've still juggled on like, oh, maybe I should cut weight. Like I know during COVID 2020 when I was training out my storage unit, I was training in my backyard. I was trying to cut down from 105 to 93 to do a last chance comp. But like even there, another point is like my mental health was going down the drain then. Like we're all in COVID, like it was a tough time. And now here I was trying to cut down to 93s to be competitive as well. And it just wasn't working out. And I think being at a body weight where you're feeling fueled, you're feeling happy, your mental health's good, and you're getting stronger, I think that's the golden spot to be in, that you're not force feeding yourself to bulk up, like even Liz has touched on it on our Instagram page, and I think she's going to do a YouTube series on it. But she was saying like she was bulking up for Worlds and she was force feeding herself. Like it was tough to eat all day, and now she's loving life in the cut, you know. So it there's no right or wrong. It's just where you feel best,
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think as well, when you talk about Liz, this is fantastic because she breaks the stereotype of like she is jacked to bits, world class. Like we probably won't see another lifter like her in the next 5 years unless the sport explodes and we attract way more people. But like, I think the reason she's had such a skyrocket to the top is because she fully dedicated to the process. She didn't like, it's one of the benefits of this podcast. We can have these discussions. A lot of young women and young guys, again, it's the assumption that lighter on the scales need to be smaller, but still want to be in a performance-based sport, which is tough. Whereas like Liz has talked about, I think one of her most recent meets, she was sitting around 90 kilos. She looked great. Performed excellently, but now it's probably that like, you know what, maybe you're at a phase now where it actually would be natural to cut down a little bit, and then you'll come back around, it'll be a phase you're at maintenance, and in another phase you might bulk up again. I think that's a natural ebb and flow for athletes. You've probably felt it yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So for the ab series comp, I cut down from 107 to 104. I think I weighed in 104.3 or something. It was a bit of a funny story. So like I'd bring down the calories a bit, and like I love a few cans on the weekend, a bit of takeaway, and of course that had to kind of gradually die down as I was getting closer to camp. And I feel like every lifter has their kind of vice for managing stress, whatever it may be, and like a few cans and takeaways, what it is for me. So coming into camp, that was cutting down a bit, and then like 3 days out, we decided to do a gut cut just to finish off the last bit, which in theory should be fine, but I have a severe allergy to nuts and milk, which are like almonds and milk is the main thing that you consume to meet your calories in a gut cut. So I went scavenging all the shops to find some way of doing it. And the only way was 99% dark chocolate. So for 3 days, I was on a diet of 3.5 99% dark chocolate bars and 2 chicken fillets.
That sounds horrendous.
It was. I kept giving pieces of chocolate to like friends and people around, and the way their faces were contorting was hilarious. I got used to it on day like 2. I was just eating away. But so I made weight, and now I'm like, after the comp, it's like I don't want to do it again for a long time, and that's where I'm now come back to a point where I'm just comfortable with my body weight, and I think it's good for a lifter to go that period of time of not cutting, not bulking, just eating, just fueling their sessions.
Just exist, bro.
That's it.
Just lift. Just enjoy the process.
Lift and exist.
Well, you've been around the game now for a while. You're in powerlifting a good little while for such a young guy.
Yeah, I think 5 years now.
So you've probably seen now, especially, I would say in the last 2 or 3 years, there's definitely been an influx of a lot of newer lifters, which is great for the sport. But do you see it now? Because you train primarily in City Gym. Do you see, and there's a lot of newer, younger junior lifters down there, do you see them making these same mistakes or going through the same mental obstacle course of, well, I want to be 74 kilos, but I also want to get bigger, but I also want to look good on the beach, but I also want to be big?
Yeah. And what I'd say to like the sub-juniors and sub-juniors and the juniors is your weight class doesn't matter. Being competitive doesn't matter. No one remembers a world champion junior lifter 2 years after the fact. Open is where it's at. Open's where the real accolades are. So if you're sub-junior and junior, I just don't believe you should be in a deficit. You should not be cutting to be competitive. If a 17-year-old shouldn't be doing a water cut to come third at an international comp or a national comp or whatever. They should be eating to fuel their sessions, not picking up niggles, not hating the sport because they're hungry and they're doing water cuts. They should be learning to enjoy it and bulking and building into the open and committing to that long-term journey.
I suppose it's tough when you're that young and, your next competition is 2 months away. Like, that probably feels like forever. You know what I mean? Because when you're that age, again, there's only so much time and experience you've had that it seems like this is the be-all, end-all. I need to place really well at the September Open.
Yeah.
And, you came 6th out of 15. Good for you. But, like, if you're going to stay in a sport for a long time, you're never going to remember where you placed or how important it was on that day, especially if you do, like yourself, go on to represent the country at, like, whether it's a world stage, a Euro stage, whatever it might be. And I think it's that, isn't it? It's like trying to keep the big picture in mind. Where could you be in 5 years if you actually dedicated to the process instead of just worrying about what's right now in front of me?
Oh, yeah. I think one of the most important parts of powerlifting is valuing longevity. And with that comes like you have to stay healthy mentally and physically, and to stay healthy in both, you need to enjoy the process and not be cutting or not be in that mindset of, I need to be the best, I need to be the best, I need to be the best for that long of a period of time. If you're thinking like that and you're cutting at 17, you're still doing it at 21 for 4 years straight, you're going to end up hating the sport. You're going to end up burning out, Like, for me, I'm very... Like, when I'm in my competition mode, like, every day I'm thinking of comp day. Every day I'm thinking of my competitors. Every day watching my body weight. Every single training session needs to be on point. And if it's not, it's doom and gloom. And now I'm not in that mentality because I value the off season. I value taking a step back from that, so that when Worlds next year comes around, let's say it comes to February next year, now I'm tapping back in. You need those off periods mentally and on periods.
Even just to enjoy your life outside of powerlifting. You can still train and have a nice, like you can have your few cans and a takeaway in the weekend now.
Yeah.
Well, tell me then, I think that's a good point because we were talking just before we came on air, or before we switched on the mics. You were telling me you'd obviously seen the clip or heard the podcast we did with Ben Harrison. Ben said he feels like there's two types of powerlifters. But you say you agree, but you think there's also a third type of powerlifter. So I think that's a good place that I think we could talk about this. So please tell me about the three types of powerlifter.
So yeah, I think there's three categories. Category one is your recreational powerlifter. You know, they do it for fun, they do it for themselves, they do it for the social aspect. That's completely fine. Nothing wrong with that. Category two is where I'd fall of, I want to be the best in the country. I want to be the best in the world. The stakes are really high for me mentally. And I will compare myself to other lifters, and not in a negative way. I'm watching other people's lifting and I'm like, I want to do that. You know, if he's moved 200 at RP8, I want to move it at RP7, you know? And then there's category three, which is like your untested, like wrapped lifters who just value total weight on the bar. They want to be the strongest human they possibly can be by any means necessary. And again, all these three categories, neither is right or wrong. It's a completely individual thing. But I think with all topics revolving around powerlifting and all takes, you need to know what category you're in before you judge, and you know what category the person you're talking to is in before you judge their opinion or their approach or what end like that.
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of a key point because you mentioned that you're going to take a pretty long off season now because you didn't want to, you have received a couple of international invites this year, but decided to opt out because you want to spend more time developing yourself as an athlete because you don't want to go and place sixth or fifth. You want to be able to have the best representation of yourself. And especially when we've got a lot of younger lifters that might be listening, it's that Melvin has turned down the opportunity this year to wear the Era singlet and represent his country. And not to say these competitions aren't important or placing sixth at a meet. If your priority is just to go and enjoy it, that was for me for Western Euros, just go and experience it. But you want to be a world champion and you have the capability to do it. And I really respect that. And I think it really speaks to that idea that you are in this for the long haul. This is that you've got a much longer game plan than the next meet. It's where is this going to be in the next year, in the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? Was that what was in your mind when you made that decision?
Yeah, that's definitely in my mind. Ben actually, he enlightened me one day. He was telling me that in powerlifting, like what's you need to be focusing on is outlasting your competitors, not outlifting them. Because if you outlast them, you will eventually outlift them. Like, I've looked at the rankings before, like on powerlifting 2019, 2020, where like I'm on total or dots, whatever you want to call it, I'm 80th. And now I'm in the top 6 or 5 in Ireland. And like a sub-junior or a junior could look at themselves and say, I'm 80th place on the rankings. Like, I'll never be a top dog powerlifter. But if they just focus, again, on having longevity and outlasting the other guys, as I've proven, you'll get there, you know? There's guys who, back in 2018, 2019, were squatting 60 kilos more than me. And I've checked it out, and now I'm out squatting them. And that's just due to focusing on my own journey, showing up, controlling the variables, and prioritizing longevity, whether that's taking a step back sometimes to enjoy the sport and all of that, you know? And
never leaving the gym without a juicy tricep pump.
You know it. The number one key.
Is that a common question you get about your bench press?
What, the triceps?
Just in general, because like for anyone listening that's unaware, Melvin has an incredibly impressive bench press. But do people actually hear, man, what is actually the secret?
Yeah, sometimes if someone comes down to City Gym, they'll often ask me, like, let's say they're on a day trip, they'll ask me, like, what some bench cues like I'd give. And for me with bench, I think like one really important thing is your leg drive, the full body movement, and that you're driving forward into the ground, not just directly down, you know? Like, that's what works for me. And obviously chalk in my head.
Yeah. And does that really work?
I think so. I think so.
Is that why you got rid of like the cool hairdo you used to have?
So
just to chalk the head?
So I think it was coincidental. I wanted to get rid of the cool hairstyle just because like I felt like I outgrown it. I wasn't styling it properly. I was just wearing a cap most of the time. So I was like, you know what, I'll try the buzz cut. I liked it. But when I set up for bench, I drive my head into the bench. I drive it back and in. And as a result, all the chalk gets on my head because I actually chalk the bench before I bench. So I draw like little square into the bench, my chalk. And then when I'm setting up, I'm driving into it. It just gets on my head.
Man, straight up, just people like, oh, take that down. You know?
This is supposed to be like a OnlyFans release for the podcast. You have to pay for Melvin's bench tips.
Melvin's secret. But like, do you think then there actually is good? Because one thing I would, and I absolutely 100% agree on, I think one of the biggest predictors of progress in specific, like whatever, we'll talk about squat and deadlift, but specifically bench, and tell me what you think, because you obviously bench quite a bit more than me, but it's always going to come down to, firstly, you need to be eating more food. Because I talked to Beck Phillips a little bit about this, who also has quite an impressive bench. A lot of it can be predicted by the thickness of your back and your chest. And you'll see these smaller lads that just don't have that thickness, who are so worried about specifically how much they're arching or reducing the range of motion as much as they can. When the reality is, if they actually gained a bit more size, maybe they'd start trending in the right direction.
Definitely. Mass moves mass. Like if you have a big, strong chest, and it's a really big chest, that's less range of motion to go, you know? If you've all these strong muscles working in tandem and you've good technique, you're going to be away with it. Like, so you can have the greatest technique in the world, but if you don't have the mass to complement it, it's pointless, or it's wasted at least, you know?
For sure. And I think as well, like, and now I think it goes without saying, we're very lucky in Ireland that pretty much every powerlifting club has an excellent standard of coaching and program. And so as long as you're following your plan, the likelihood is you will see progress. But if the goal is that much, much bigger, juicier Melvin style bench, it's going to take time. And do you actually always leave the gym with a juicy tricep pump?
I do. I could have walked into the gym and it's just squat, nothing else, and I'll do 3 tricep accessories.
Fair. So you heard it here first. Do not leave the gym without a juicy tricep pump. But in saying that then, have you found as you've trended up in weight, because you've come through a couple of weight classes now you're sitting quite comfortably in the under 105s, have you found that this is the kind of body weight where you're able to be your strongest versus when you were lighter or even a little bit heavier?
Definitely. I don't see myself trying to go back down to 93s ever again. Thankful, yeah. At most, I might just cut to 100 just for aesthetic purposes. As in for like 120s, if I was to ever do it, I don't think I'd ever fill it out. A 5'7" guy should not be 120 kilos.
We'd be rolling you onto the platform.
No shade to guys who fit that description.
Just for you and your own personal goals.
Just my own personal goals. I think being between like 105 kilos and maybe 110 at the cap, when I fill it out a bit more, I feel really comfortable in this range, you know?
For sure. And I think it's kind of that, isn't it? You're trying to find what gives you the best performance, because as you said, sometimes I've seen it because I train with a lot of super heavyweight guys, when they get up into very, very heavyweights, it actually can cost them weight on some other lifts. As much as being bigger and heavier might help them for the likes of squats and bench, it can take away from deadlifts in some cases.
Oh yeah.
So I think there's absolutely a case for that. You'll find the exact kind of within a certain range what suits you best and how you're most comfortable with in yourself, as you mentioned, your mental health and your performance on the platform. And kind of having a good balance of all those things is what will make you stay in the game for longer.
Yeah, because like even, I'm sure a lot of people have felt it before, like where they're in a bulk, but they go too far in the deep end and they walk into the gym and they feel like shit. Like aesthetically, how their belly feels, they feel terrible. And simply just because of that, not talking about physical, but just because of how they feel mentally, they'll perform worse, you know? So like you have to judge like, where do you feel comfortable mentally with your body weight, and will that throw you off, you know, when it comes to your lifts? So it's really a juggling act.
Let me ask you a little bit of question, kind of going back in time here a little bit. So you had moved across from AIPO into the Irish PF. This was what year around?
Like 2018, I'd say.
Cool. And now, so you've been around, that's 5 years or so lifting in the Irish PF. How have you seen the federation change and evolve in that time? Because it's come through a couple of different committees, a couple of different people that have been involved. And I know recently I was down at the September Open in Phenom Gym, which didn't even exist a couple of years ago, and those guys smashed it. They had such a great setup. It was such a great, and it's not a huge gym, but they did such a great job with everything from the banner, the stage, the platform, the crowd involvement, the music choices, the warm-up room, which again, admittedly was small, but they maximized the space brilliantly. I honestly can't say enough for how good of a job they've done. So from your very first meet in the Irish PF to even most recently, I assume was Nationals?
I guess, Nationals would be the most recent one. I think the Open Nationals has been the pinnacle of the Irish PF. Like, just having that comp in the hotel was such an amazing experience. I'm so used to like walking into a gym and there's only one toilet and it's really crammed, it's hot, it's sweaty, it's uncomfortable. Everyone's walking all over each other in the warm-up room to like, again, the Radisson, where it was a huge venue and like you just got elevator down to comp. It felt like prestigious. It felt legit, you know. I think that really set the precedent that like Open Nationals, the biggest comp of the year, shouldn't be in a crammed gym, you know?
And I will also say, I'll back that up because I know from having conversations recently about a few topics we'll get onto shortly about the evolution of where Irish powerlifting's going. But I think it was a lot of the competitions being run in gyms was born of necessity.
Yeah.
Because access to equipment, you know, the gyms are kind of have like even abs, for example, is kind of set up with a stage all the time. Yeah. So it made sense, particularly during COVID, because I know prior to COVID, they actually did run quite a few events outside of the gyms. But I think it became this thing during COVID to kind of rely on the likes of abs, City Gym, just became easy to tick that box in, and Gainfort up north, Phenom then as well. And I think now coming into 2024, I would agree. I think we're going to see an evolution of that where more meets are going to be run outside of clubs. I don't think there's a problem with keeping a lot of open meets in the clubs.
No, yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
But the bigger meets, I completely agree, for the prestige that they are. And it's, you know, it's particularly with Open Nationals, you know, the top 7 lifters in each weight class across the board presented on this huge stage, I think is massive. But you've obviously seen the sport evolve quite a lot then in those 5 years. What have been some of the biggest changes you've seen?
Let me think now.
I'm kind of putting you on the spot, I know. Just as somebody who's been around, and I know...
I'd say the community aspect. I think nowadays in comps, like, even you see it with like the Odyssey page and a few other pages, they offer like comp day handling for people who don't have coaches, you know? And there's so much more accessibility to information for new lifters, and the community is way stronger where you can show up, maybe even without a coach, and people still approach you being like, how are you getting on? Do you want to work in with us? Do you have a coach? Do you need a handler? And they're all for it, you know? And I think that's really awesome. It's a really awesome progression to see. I'd say that'd be the main one for me.
I would completely agree. I completely agree. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand with the uptake of social media. Yeah. And as more like younger people that grew up with social media become like adults now, God help them, you know, they've grown up in that age of like digital technology, so they're so dialed into like the value of like Instagram, like you were mentioning earlier on with Listis and some of the video editing she does. Like that's just a natural thing for her, and all her videos are so cool, and that's probably why she has this great big, other than being a fantastic lifter, but like the presentation of the sport, I think's gotten better, and everyone definitely is a bit more interconnected because we have I mentioned that video of you nearly killing yourself with the barbell earlier on. For anyone that hasn't seen it, Melvin went to unrack, like it looked like, what was it, like 210?
215.
215. And the one side of the bar, as he stepped under to unrack for high bar squat, the entire bar rolled off on one side, smacked him in the neck, and all the plates fell off on one side. But you still went on to squat a personal best, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it had to be done. Yeah. The day rolls on, you know?
Definitely Ken or Dammy or somebody out to get you.
Oh, yeah. When I said the ops, those are the only 2 guys I was talking about. they DM'd me afterwards like, oh, are you all right? I knew they didn't care.
They're like...
Literally.
But I think that is the bigger piece of it, because even I'll say this, like you mentioned the Odyssey boys, Connor, Adam, Nathan, Clarice, Andrew, all their coaches are there's some collection of them at every meet. I've had Adam and Connor on here at different times. They always give a dig out in the warm-up room. All the boys in Chaos, Ben, Cian Robinson, Scott Dean, they always give a hand in the warm-up room. And that's one of the things I love to see, because I put it up on Instagram recently. This year I'll have been at 14 different meets by the time we get to the end of it. I made it a choice. I was like, I want to be everywhere. I want to see how this is all done. I want to give a hand where I can, volunteer where I can, whatever, and compete where I can.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the things that stood out to me the most, was like, everyone actually just really gets on so well. Like all the lads, when we were down in Cork, I was out for dinner anyway, but the lads were all out drinking in the pav, and they were like, "Are you coming down the pav?" And I was like, I'm actually gone for dinner anyway. But it's cool to see that everyone's all kind of in it together. It doesn't matter kind of what logo you're wearing on your t-shirt anymore.
Yeah, like we're all in this for the same thing. We all want to get way stronger, you know? Even your rival, like, sure, they're coming for what you want, but that's all the more reason to respect them and like them and get along with them. They are the exact same kind of person as you are, you know, with me, Dammy, and Ken coming into Open Nationals, like we were beefing online. There was loads of digs thrown, big rivalry. And afterwards, it was like, fuck you, congratulations, man, you won. You know, like you wanted what I wanted. You busted your ass day in, day out. Like, I know exactly how you felt, and I wish I felt that feeling of winning, but it was for you, you know? And it's like, how could you hate that guy? How could you not get along with the other person beside you? So it's a no-brainer that the whole community is getting along, you know?
Yeah, you will always find you've way more in common with the people you're going against than people that are doing a completely different sport. Let's say, for example, like Ken, Dammy, and everyone else that was competing at nationals, anyone else that competes in the sport, we've all way more in common with each other than we like to admit, because we're all doing the same thing. We're all lifting the heavy circle to make the sad voice go away, you know?
Exactly.
But that under 105 battle, when I had Ian Benson on a couple of months ago, we were actually talking about that. And I have had this conversation a couple of times about that flight. And I always make the joke that myself, Beck Phillips, Cian Madden, Adam Joy, and Dustin DePerio, we were just the warm-up back for you boys. We were just getting that bar moving so you guys could go out and battle it out, you know? Because we were all in the same session, God help us, you know? We were like, we were the jobbers in the opener match, you know? And you guys were the ME. But the thing I wanted to talk about, and we talked about it a little bit before, I think you guys captured something in those couple of weeks and months building up that I really want powerlifting to embrace more. Jay Farrant obviously does it a lot with the series, but I think this is the next logical step. It's let's not just worry about, you know, records and the prestige and how much weight's on the bar. Let's build the characters. Let's build the rivals. Let's build these stories around, like yourself, Ken, and Dammy are three extremely unique individuals who all have your strengths, your pros, your cons. Like we could do a stat card for everybody, you know? So I'd love to see that. I loved that you guys did that. But talk me through a little bit about that. What was the motivation there? Did it just start happening naturally? Or did you guys get in a group chat and be like, right, lads?
So it started naturally, and then a group chat was made like a week out. But I'll go from the beginning. I don't know who threw the first shot. I'd like to think it was me. But yeah, like I think when it comes to like the beef and the rivalries, you have to put feelers out to see how does the other guys pick it up. So like, I think one of us threw a dig, the other guy threw one back, all in good. What's the word? Like
all in good sport. Yeah,
all in good sport.
Bit of banter,
bit of banter, you know. And it just escalated and snowballed from there. And I think it was unsaid, but all of us were like, "This is awesome. This is so cool." Just like be beefing. It feels like a real sport, you know. It feels like a real like competition. It's not just, oh, we're all happen to be strong. We'll all show up on the day and may the best man win. It felt like there was actual stakes, you know. I think that's what sport needs. And like whilst we were doing it, we were seeing like everyone like reposting our stories. Jerkules jumped in and he was reposting them. And I was like, oh, now people are really interested in seeing the three of us lift, you know? And then we made a group chat and we were even beefing more in that. And then the day played out and all of it, all the beefing and the rivalry lived up to the hype, you know? And it was an amazing thing to see. Even in the warm-up room, we were like shouting at each other, giving out to each other or whatever. And after the day, we all shook hands and whatever. We're like, that was a amazing comp. For 1 kilo and the difference of all of us, it couldn't have been a more perfect ending. And I think coming back to the social media part of it and the promotion with Jay, imagine how much cooler that would be if then the federation was posting this stuff. The federation was posting the bill of like who will win, Dammy, Ken, Melvin, whatever, you know? I think the Irish PF and Irish powerlifting as a whole has really strong lifters and like the potential to have great rivalries, but it's just the social media and the federations aren't fueling them, you know? And that's where we're missing out on these characters being built and people building their own platforms.
I've had this conversation off air, I'd say dozens of times now over the last couple of weeks, even months. And I think some of it kind of boils down to this. And I'm just going to use the likes of Jay and the AB series versus, say, the Irish PF. So the one thing I'll give the Irish PF is it's only been around since, 2015 now?
Yeah.
You know, so it's still quite new. And it's run by a committee, and the committee changes. It originally every 4 years, now every 2 years. So it's probably more difficult to find a true sense of identity of how to present the platform, how to present the sport. And it's one of those things, it's like, the handy thing for us with the series, because I work at the series as well, is that it's Jay's baby. Now, we all have a piece of it. We all have, like, I'll tell you, I've mentioned it on here before. If I have an idea, particularly coming from a pro wrestling background, I'm like, Jay, what about if we try this? Yeah. He'll be like, oh yeah, let's try that. Let's see if that works. And he'll give it a go. We'll like place it, we'll put things down, we'll move things around in the gym and see what would work. Whereas I think with the Irish PF, it's what's the best way we can present the lifting? Just the lifting. Let's not worry about a stage. Let's not worry about, let's give the lifters a place to lift, you know, and everything else is secondary. And I get that, but the trouble with that is that what is the athlete experience like? What is the spectator experience like? Because this is one thing I said recently, and this podcast will have gone out by then when we did the USAPL Ireland reveal, which we'll talk about shortly. This will have gone out by then. I said openly, like, I lift in the Irish PF and I strongly believe it's a great representation of powerlifting. But I think the issue is that if I'm a spectator, I'm only going to go to an Irish PF meet if I have lifters at it or somebody I know is lifting at it. The audience are bought into one or maybe two people, but they're not going to watch Melvin versus Dami versus Ken unless it's got that development prior, where they've got a reason to be bought in. Whereas I know people that will travel from all over Ireland and even internationally just to come and watch the AB series.
Yeah, like I think come back to spectators, you have to give them a reason to be a fan besides X lifter lifts X weight, you know? Like, especially in all these meets, you often bring our friends or family, whatever. And how are they going to invest it into anyone else if there was no storyline for them to follow? Like there's a guy that I work with, and I was telling him about a time where me and Ian Benson in person were beefing each other, and we were like, oh, I'm better than you, blah, blah. And he's like, really? Like, that's crazy. Like, I'd really want to put you and Ian in a comp now, you know? And he's never even powerlift. He's never even watched it. But through that one conversation I have with him and telling him the little storyline of me and Ian going at each other, he was like, I want to watch that now. You know, it's just getting people invested into a story. And I think Jay in the AB series does that amazingly, you know?
Yeah, and it's one of the advantages we have about it, that whole thing being in his control. You know, it's that there is a definite vision and everyone can kind of help move the needle in one particular direction. Like the story was, and I've told it on the podcast before, is for the third deadlifts at the Abs Pro, the lifters entered through the audience instead of to the side of the stage. And it was amazing. Like, that could have gone completely wrong. It could have been stupid. The lifter could have tripped on the way out and fucked up their attempt. But it went so well. And it created some great content and some great memories. And the crowd, kudos to everybody that was there. It'd been a very long day. They knew exactly what to do. They stood up on the raised platforms. They cheered and shouted and clapped, raised their fists. And it was there's some amazing footage of Boris Cheshkov coming out to take a crack at his third attempt. He had already locked in the win by then. I think he was trying to pull something ridiculous, like 400 kilos at 104. Jeez. You know, crazy lifters. That's what I loved about it. It's that, because really that's what it is. It's not, like, records are cool, right? If you're into records, you know. The thing is, I'll remember about nationals is those few moments coming into those third deadlifts. Yeah. The things I remember about the series aren't weights on the bar, it's specific moments. You know, somebody coming out for that pull, and this was pivotal. As you mentioned, for you, Ken and Dami, nationals came down to 1 kilo on the third deadlift, because it was still anyone's, and that's the beauty of it. It was still anyone's comp until that third deadlift. And I love the story that essentially you kind of had it in the bag coming into deadlifts, and then loads of different things started happening then. And everyone was shouting and screaming and roaring the house down, and it was fantastic. Like, that was, because I remember we were in the back going, Jesus.
Yeah, like, it comes across like some kind of scripted event, you know, like you come back to WWE, like, and I don't know, one wrestler sees winning, and then all of a sudden, someone comes out of nowhere and disqualifies the match or steel chair out of nowhere, and you think like obviously with wrestling that's scripted. So for what happened to us to happen naturally, and for fans to get that experience was crazy. But I do think like powerlifters can do more to raise the stakes for the fans and to not like in comp, but like and lead up. Let's say the federation isn't going to do it because like it's a volunteer thing and to begin with. But let's say lifters they're both close on total, they can come between each other and be like, let's build a storyline, where it's a bit of banter, whatever. I think that's essential from the lifter standpoint and the federation or the organizer.
So where would you like to see, let's say you had complete control now, where do we take the Irish PF in the next 4 years? Like what would Melvin like to see? Because I think the standard of lifting just goes up all the time anyway. The standard of the platforms goes up and the presentation is getting better all the time. So what could we do now to raise that standard even more?
So I think it's about raising the standard of like the spectator experience. Like you said yourself, like the federations focus on like the lifters in a way and like making sure the events run properly. But now it's like we need to get the fans interested in it. And that's where, like, for me, like I think, like I say, you're looking at like a lot of sports where like you're allowed to drink at it even. And fans are often more invested in something where there's good music playing and there's drink available. I think that would be pretty cool, where people are encouraged to have like signs up, like in wrestling, you know, stuff like that. Even like Sheffield, where people like booing and people were cheering. Like, imagine if then like there was like a Heineken stand as well, and like chants started going and all that. I think if we went in that direction, that'd be pretty cool. It's just, of course, then with the IPF, they want it very pristine. They want it very like crisp and clean and none of that. But I think that's then where the USAPL, with that forming, that's where it's their opportunity to go down the avenue that I'd like to see.
Okay, well, you know what? That's the perfect time. Let's talk about it. So I have previously done a podcast with Jay Farrant of Abs Powerlifting, Gar Ben of City Gym, Ian Benson of Urban Barbell. They've decided to pool their resources and bring the USAPL Ireland to Ireland and be a subsidiary of that federation. And this is now going to provide people with another tested platform to a very high standard with an international pathway. How do you, as one of Ireland's premier under 105s, what does this mean to you?
So I'm really excited for it. I do think it's a net positive. For me, will I partake in it like when it opens up next year? Unfortunately not. And I don't think there's any issue on the Irish PF or the USAPL. I think the bigger issue is with Article 14. I think that's just stunted the growth of the sport massively, where like the IPF has to stay its crisp, clean, pristine image because they want to get to the Olympics. USAPL isn't trying to do that. So I assume USAPL will go down more the route I'm talking about, where like it is a bit more grittier, it's a bit edgier. It's kind of like if anyone watches WWE, there's Raw and there's SmackDown, and SmackDown's pretty clean and Raw is where like all the edgier stuff happens. I think that's where the USAPL could go. And I'd love to be able to dabble in both. But for me, I want to go up against the best in the world in a wide talent pool, like not just the US. So with the sacrifice of with the consequence of a ban happening, I would have to stay in the IPF until the USAPL can build its foundation internationally and it can build a wider talent pool. When I see like there's a lot of competitive 105s from like, let's say France, Germany, whatever all these countries are, not just the US, that's when I'd like to go over there. But I actually think recently I saw, it must be a rumor, but I saw someone saying SBD is trying to like push the IPF into getting rid of the Article 14 because for the whole growth of the international sport, being able to dabble in both, like a rising tide lifts all ships.
100%, yeah. I would kind of say this when it comes to the likes of Article 14, right? So for those unaware that are listening, Article 14 essentially prohibits, if you're lifting in the IPF, and by IPF, I mean International Powerlifting Federation, all federations underneath that, including the Irish PF. But just to be clear, these are two different entities. The Irish PF is kind of beholden to the rules of the IPF rulebook. And in it, there's Article 14, which prohibits lifters from competing at other meets that are not IPF meets. So just so everyone's on the same page. I understand one piece of it, right? Let's say you have been selected and taken a spot at IPF Worlds to represent Ireland, right? And you get that invite 6 months in advance. I would understand you signing a piece of paper that says you will not compete anywhere else in these 6 months because you don't want to jeopardize what you do at this meet. I get that, and you're representing your country. It's it's the world level. It's the highest you can go in the IPF. Cool, I totally get that. But I don't see the difference it makes for some lad that's at a second meet. It's a September Open, and then 3 months later he wants to lift at the AB Series, and 4 months after that he wants to lift at USAPL. The lad's, a 500 kilo total, he's 340 dots. Let him get his experience. Let him enjoy the sport. The thing is, the vast majority of people in the sport are never getting to nationals, let alone international levels. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but the selection of spots is so competitive at Open Nationals. There's only 7 lifters per weight class. And the qualifying standards go up every year. So the likelihood is there's so many people that are going to dabble in the sport that just want to lift. And I don't think it matters where they lift. But I'm saying I do get the idea that you want to keep your your country's team injury free. You want there to be an air of exclusivity. But let's say Melvin is going to compete at IPF Worlds in 2024. So he signs his contract, let's just say in January. And let's say Worlds is in June. And after that point, you're like, you know what? I'm not going to lift in the IPF for the rest of the year. I'm going to go across and do a USAPL. USAPL have invited me under a Euros tour. I don't think it should matter after that point where you want to lift, because you've lived up to your commitment. And once that world competition's over, where you want to lift after that becomes irrelevant until you're invited back to another major meet for the IPF. That's my personal opinion. There's probably an element of it where I'm like, maybe I'm not clued in on some of the details or the motivations, but that's how I see it from somebody who hasn't lifted on a world level yet. You know what I mean? That I don't see how that pushes the dial forward for the lifter, for the spectator, for the sport's growth. But what do you think as somebody who lifts at a higher level than I do?
I think it comes across very much like trying to gatekeep talent in a way, or like scare lifters into staying with the IPF. But I do think when USAPL starts having their really cool meets run by Jay and Gar and Ian, and like, again, coming back to the category of lifters, I do think a lot of category 1 lifters where they're doing it recreationally, they're not trying to be the best in the world. I'd highly encourage all of them to do like a USAPL meet instead of an IPF. It's just way more accessible. With your membership, you can go to any USAPL fed in the world. You can do USAPL Netherlands or Las Vegas or whatever. And like from bits I've seen from Gar, like it looks like it's going to be awesome, you know? So I think for the category 1 lifters, they should go that route. Category 2 would, in my opinion, should probably wait a while until it builds legs a bit more and then go into it.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, but coming back to like my opinion on the Article 14 and all that, I just think it's detrimental to the growth of the sport, you know? So
I would love to think in the long run, perhaps enough that the resistance to change will ultimately force it to have to adapt. Because, and this is what I would say to any Irish powerlifter that's listening to this and is still curious about what's going to happen in 2024 when it comes to USAPL Ireland, the Irish PF, the AB Series, whatever it might be. More competitions is good for the athletes. There is more
100%.
opportunities to lift. There's more opportunities to get your name out there. There's more platforms for you to compete in at times and dates that suit you around your other commitments, which is only a positive. The other piece of it is yes, there's people that are kind of trying to jump into the drama of, Jay, Ian and Gar withdrawing a lot of their resources from the Irish PF to focus on USAPL Ireland. However, I would phrase it this way. The Irish PF has grown massively over the last 8 years. This has now created opportunities there where the federation, there's a couple of key players that aren't there anymore. Great. Who wants to step up? Who wants to give it a fresh coat of paint? Who wants to change the way we do things? Bring fresh ideas to the table, maybe think outside the box. And if we see the USAPL Ireland having these bigger, better venues with better presentation and the lifters want to lift there, that's just going to helped the RSPF go, you know what, maybe there is a way we can level up now as well. And this is only going to benefit the lifters, and it's only going to benefit the audience.
Yeah, definitely. Like, even coming back to something you said, like, let's say, like, even with Gar in City Gym, I was having a conversation with him, and like he was saying running meets with USAPL Ireland is a lot more financially beneficial for him, which it's not an evil thing. It's makes sense, you know? And I was chatting to him about investing more into the gym, like even getting new deadlift mats or carpets with the City Gym logo on them. And he was like, that's going to cost 4 figures, you know? And like he's running meets in the IPF and he's losing money on them, you know? Whereas if he can start running meets and making a profit, that money can go back into the gym, which ultimately increases the lifter's experience. Now we're training in a premier facility because Gar has funding to make it one or to increase it anyways, you know? Or coming back to what I was saying earlier about maybe the federation's Instagram page, like hyping up these rivalries. Let's say the RSPF isn't doing that now and USAPL does, and it gets loads of traction and engagement. The RSPF might be like, maybe we should start doing that as well. Or even the greater federation, the IPF. You know, I think when USAPL starts pulling lifters and doing something different and more accessible, and it grows and snowballs, that's where, like you said, the federation would be like, okay, we need to scrap this Article 14. We need to take some of their ideas, you know? So I'm really excited to see how it plays out.
And absolutely, I would say that as well. If somebody has a good idea, absolutely rip it off.
Yeah.
Oh, steal it. If it's working, it could work for you too. Steal all the good ideas. That's what we all do. This is actually something I've noticed this as, my full-time gig is coaching powerlifting. That's what I do for a living. And I know this year, one of the biggest frustrations I've had as a coach is there haven't been enough meets for all my lifters to lift at. I've had lifters trying to get meets for the September Open, the October Open, the Abs Series, Abs Teens, Abs in August, and they just couldn't get tickets quick enough because the demand is so high. So I've got one lifter who's been wanting to lift since May, who will not be lifting till next April. They did get a ticket for Abs Series, I believe it's 16.
That's crazy. Even in City Gym, for the City Gym Open, a lot of City Gym lifters didn't get tickets. I know one fella who he had to resort to wanting to run like a mock meet in City Gym and getting rest for it and all that because he couldn't get a ticket for a meet in his own gym, you know? And it just goes to show how much pressure there is. So why then like want to ban lifters for going to another federation that runs more meets? It makes no sense. You're now allowing this let's say a new guy who's has insane strength, comes into sport, he wants to commit to it, can't get a ticket for a meet, and then he leaves maybe potentially because he's like, oh, it's too much effort to try and get into a meet. Whereas now if there's 2 feds, there's maybe over 20 meets in the year, that lifter will stay in the sport. And maybe one year they'll do an IPF meet, the next they'll do USAPL, or even the same year they could do both if there was no rules saying you can't.
And that's a massive piece of it. Again, as a coach, I want to strike while the iron's hot. It takes a while for people to come around to the idea of putting on a singlet and doing lifts in front of a big audience of people. So when they've kind of overcome that mental barrier and like, I want to do a competition now, I want to get their ass on a competition platform as soon as I can. Because it's one of those things. It's like when you try to convince a friend to come to the gym with you and you're like, trust me, if you just give it a try for long enough, you will love this because it's great fun. And I've never met somebody ever who's gotten, I've brought a lot of people into the sport and I've never met one that's gone, you know what, one meet was enough for me, thanks. They all go, when can I do another one? When can I do more of this? Hook it up to my veins. That's the good stuff.
That's it. Like one analogy. If this friend wants to get into the gym, but you can only get day passes. And if you go to another gym, you're banned from our gym. That friend's definitely not going to get into the gym, you know?
Yeah.
So the same thing goes for the rule.
I suppose it's that, isn't it? We have to look at what are the motivations for rules like this, and do those rules and what you're saying therefore and your intentions, do they match up with the outcome? So I'd imagine whoever came up with this rule, or whichever committee came up with this rule, it was made in an effort to try and maintain a certain aesthetic or standard to the sport. And maybe 15 years ago, where there was a lot of like very Mickey Mouse competitions going on all over the place, maybe it made sense.
Yeah.
But in 2023, where we have an incredibly high standard all across the world and more people with the visibility of social media are calling out, like, that squat was high. That doesn't count. You know, that bench is, you know, your arse is halfway in the air. You know, that deadlift was hitched or you didn't lock out your knees. People want to be lifting to a higher standard.
Yeah, because like you come back to Sheffield, in my mind, that wasn't an IPF event. That was an SBD event.
Yes.
You know, fully organized by them. A lot of stuff you saw happen there wouldn't happen at an IPF Worlds, of the chanting, the booing, the lifters going crazy on stage, like Gavin Aiden walking out in front and like banging his chest. You wouldn't see that at IPF meet. Yet, then you look at how much engagement that meet got, or like the iconic video of like Jonathan Keiko and the camera going up to his face. That's an SBD production, not an IPF production. But the IPF benefited so much from it. Like maybe like a lot of like influencers got into powerlifting because of that, because they saw the traction and then they fell in love with the sport. They bring their fans into the sport and it's a snowball effect. You know, now like we have really big influencers in the sport, like Nathaniel Messiah is a UK lifter with like 120,000 followers. Liz is building her following and would love to do all big like production event meets, you know. So if USAPL Ireland or USAPL is doing meets that look similar to Sheffield and is building the traction like Sheffield, the IPF needs to know like that talent will eventually then come back into their federation, you know?
And you 100% capture exactly that when you say it, because even, have you seen Andrew Blackwood's video where he forgot to have his deadlift socks on?
Yeah.
And he makes the funny face at the camera? That was memed. Like, he's become a meme. Eddie Hall has watched him lifting in his little shed.
Yeah, I saw.
You know, so these are all funny little quirky bits that have brought the visibility of the sport up, because that's all it takes. It's like, who's that guy making the funny face? What's that like green onesie he's wearing? Oh, he lifts for Team Ireland. What's the sport? And they look it up and now they know what powerlifting is. And I suppose it's kind of a case of this, is I would say, and definitely give me your thoughts, I think powerlifting is much more of a spectacle sport.
Yeah.
I want to see people performing feats. And I look at other sports that are like that. So look at like strongman is very much it's a spectacle sport. Darts is a spectacle sport. Pro wrestling in essence is a spectacle sport, because people will talk about, like, think about it, like you're obviously a pro wrestling fan.
Yeah.
Right? They have the WrestleMania moments. Brock Lesnar doing the shooting star press at WrestleMania 19. You know, those moments, that's the point. It's not about the intrinsities of the match. Or even if you go onto like YouTube, a lot of what people watch in pro wrestling isn't even the full match. It's the entrances, or like The Rock comes back, CM Punk debut in AEW, whatever it might be. This is what people are looking at. They're looking at these cool moments. And I think with powerlifting, it's one of those things. I've said it on this podcast before. There's only so many times you can watch somebody do a deadlift with all the red plates on the bar. And it stops mattering how many kilos it is. But it matters that Melvin dropped this deadlift. And now Dami and Ken have a chance.
Yeah.
That's cool.
If there's a camera crew in the warm-up room, capturing that moment where I dropped my second deadlift and I was like, oh, fuck, like I've opened it up and I've messed it up and all this. That'd be awesome. You know, if camera, like, powerlifting will excel if they drop the need to feel like a formal, professional, pristine, crisp, clean sport. Like the Andrew Blackwood moment. That wasn't formal, or that was a joke, you know, or like
it was funny.
It was funny, yeah. Or like Gavin Aiden banging his chest after he squatted a record, you know, like that gets people hyped up. That gets people's adrenaline going. And I think if the sport has more moments like that, where like they're capturing the raw moments, like whether it's funny or like epic or hyped, that's where the sport excels, you know. Or even if, let's say, hypothetically, lifters were mic'd up when they're going out to do their attempts and they had the opportunity to like rile up the crowd after they get their lift, or they missed their lift and you hear what they're saying when they're walking off the platform. All those little moments that feel like they're behind the scene moments, or like you don't typically see it. That's what people live for, you know. And I think that's what made Sheffield so special.
And Jay has said it on this podcast, people buy people.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things, one of the things that actually brought me really into pro wrestling when I was getting into it, there was a documentary back in the day called Beyond the Mat. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it. It was about the backstage of the WWF in like 1999. And it's so interesting. And it follows like two indie wrestlers that are trying to get contracts. And it's so good. And it goes and speaks to Jake the Snake Roberts, who was going through a lot of tribulations at the time and things like that, and him working on indie shows. But like, I completely agree, and it's something Dan taught me here in Primal. It's when it comes to a lot of like visibility for your brand or your sport or an athlete, it's not just about creating content, it's document everything. Why can't we have a crew out the back at nationals taking pictures and filming the warm-up room? And maybe like I've actually got pictures from the warm-up room of me sitting there on the chair or like warming up for my deadlift, because one of my lifters is a photographer from Motion Masters, and they were doing a few bits with Cian Madden in the lead up, but they came and took pictures of a couple of the lads and myself as well, because we're all mates. Like, but I'll actually give you again. This is like a secondhand story, so I'm not saying this is legit. As like I don't have all the details, but Motion Masters were helping to sponsor Cian going to IPF Worlds. They were like trying to film and take pictures of a lot of like interviewing him a lot and trying to create a little bit of like a documentary. He was told he couldn't go to Worlds. And bring his cameras and his filming equipment and his photographer. It's Mario Morelli. Every cool like picture you've seen of the ab series is Jacob Pratt.
Yeah, I have a picture. I think Alex used it on the Celis powerlifting cover, and it's one of those coolest pictures I've ever seen of myself. I loved it. It was from him.
Yeah,
you know,
that's Jacob. So Jacob's one of my lifters, right? And you'll see this kid like contorting himself on the floor to try and get the best shot. I always know because his deadlifts are dog shit the week after a meet because he's broke to bits. And then all the cool like, you know, the lifter highlights and things you see of the ab series and like the pro lifters and all the like the cool action shots and all the stuff Jay has done now over the last couple of months, like advertising the gym. That's generally all Mario's, all Motion Masters. So all those cool moments we're seeing is because somebody let this guy in with his camera crew, with his photographer, and let them go to work. And it looks great. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. It's like, why not? And it's like, well, you know, White Light are going to be there, SBD are going to be there. It's like, just give the guy a media pass.
That's it. Like, again, it's more gatekeeping for no reason. It's like, no, we won't let you document more cool powerlifting footage that could go viral at our meet. It's still at the IPF meet. You know, so if Wildlight's there, they might not capture the same shots, the same edits, the same videos that another guy will, you know?
Well, even for us with Western Euros, there was some kind of media done, but there was no packages or photo packages offered to the lifters. I did get one or two cool shots because their photographer obviously uploaded a lot of it to the Facebook page, which was cool. I'm a boomer, I'm still on Facebook. But like that was cool to have. But like I would have paid money for a media package. I would have happily, like, I would have if I had known that, I probably would have seen what would it take to bring my guys with me, like bring Motion Masters over to take some pictures, take some videos, and maybe offer that to the Irish team. You know what I mean? Why not?
Yeah, like people want to see more than lifter steps on the platform does lift steps off. Like you said, that gets boring after a few hours of watching a comp. You know, people want to see behind the scenes shots. They want to see the cool edits afterwards. And I think like the federation, like the IPF, should definitely be allowing that, you know, not just the one team, definitely.
Yeah. And is that something you think somewhere the sport could go in the future? Is that we do start to take advantage of the interesting characters we have? Some more like day in the life of Melvin, day in the life of Dammy, day in the life of Ken, day in the life of Cian Madden, whoever it might be, where like it might be a bit of checking out what your training's like, what your diet's like coming into it. Like, you know, Melvin, 4 weeks out, you know, deadlift day.
Like, let's say like there's a really cool rivalry coming up into building up into a meet, and people are already excited for it. If let's say 3 weeks out, the whatever federation it is reaches out to lifter A and is like, oh, when are you doing your last heavy singles? On this day, we're going to come and record it and chat to you for a bit. Then we're going to go out to his other guy's gym, and let's say the 3 guys, they all have like day in the life videos leading up into comp or what their training's looking like, and the federation's posting it and showcasing it. That would be so cool. Now then people would be way more interested in watching it on the day, you know, because they just got a bit more investment into the lifter.
And it's not, this is the thing, it's these people that can make this great content are already in the sport. Like you guys have Jay Stetics.
Yeah, he's killing it.
He made that like City Gym ad there like the other week. Man, that's so cool, man.
It was insane. He went off on that one, you know. Even like in City Gym now, he does a lot of like interviews with lifters before they compete. And whether it gets 100 views or 1,000 or 1,000,000, like even for the lifter, I feel like, oh, like I'm in a legit sport. This is so cool. I'm being interviewed, even if it's my mate, you know?
Yeah.
I think that comes back to the lifter experience and ab series. Like all those lifters feel like proper athletes.
Yeah.
Like they're really cared about. They're really valued. And when they're stepping onto that stage, it's like a movie moment.
And even with that, you mentioned that with it, that just sparks in my mind. I know that that's worked because I know Katrina Connolly's only a few weeks out from Euros. So like, even that, like I might not have known that otherwise.
Exactly.
Because he took the time to make that content, sit down and chat to one of the lifters. I now am more bought into their experience, you know? And now obviously I'm in on this side of the sport, but who's to say that hasn't gotten somebody else? You know what? I'll watch that. I'll watch that when it's on YouTube.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another interesting part is that, like, for me, I want to be like a really well-known, like world-renowned powerlifter, but it's not enough to be strong nowadays. You need to be a good content creator. You need to be posting actively. You need to be making really cool edits. It can't just be on your iPhone, even though most of my videos are on my iPhone. And that's where these content creators come in, where like, sure, I can't make a really cool edit of myself because that's just not my area of expertise, but Jay can, you know? And that's where he can help me showcase myself and build that kind of portfolio for me of I'm not just a lifter, I have all these other cool personality traits, and that helps me build the legacy I want, basically.
And it's a representative. I think we're coming into a bit of a golden age now because as the sport, like the sport's about to explode, let's just be honest. 2014, Jesus. 2024 is going to be a huge year for Irish powerlifting in particular. Irish PF are running 6 or 7 opens, something crazy, which is more than they have in the past.
Yeah.
The AB series, there's some good stuff cooking. I'm not going to reveal too much. USAPL Ireland is coming. There's going to be more meets. There's going to be more platforms. There's going to be new venues. Even if you're somebody who's not necessarily interested in competing, but you want to be part of the sport, whether it's how it's presented, making content of the sport, this is going to be such a good year. And this is that moment for who are going to be the early adopters, who are going to be people that are going to get in on day one and say, I want to film footage for you. I want to take photographs for you. And who are going to be the lifters to capitalize on that? Who are going to be lifters say, you know what? All eyes are on the sport now. I am going to start pumping out some content here. I'm going to start posting some BS of me just doing my day of training or what I'm eating for the day or a hot take on powerlifting. This is going to be a good year.
Yeah, for sure. Like if, again, you fall into that category 2, like you want to be renowned, you want to be a recognized competitive powerlifter, you do need to be a content creator. But now, like you've said yourself, with more eyes on the sport, more content creators are coming into the sport. I was listening to a podcast with Russell Orhe, and he was saying in his gym in Houston in Corrupted Strength, like he has young fellas coming to the gym all the time being like, oh, I got accommodation down here for 2 months just to shoot content, powerlifting content. That's insane. If you think back to like 2017, 16 and earlier, no one was traveling from one country or one county to the other to record another person lifting, you know? It just goes to show the direction it's going in.
Well, think back. There used to be days where firstly, we didn't know what was happening at the meets unless somebody filmed it on a brick of a phone and threw it up on their Instagram. Or even when we did start getting live streams, they were off someone's phone.
Yeah.
You know? So it's crazy to see where it's gone, but that's the idea. It's where it's going. And you've said it right there. There's people willing to travel, live in a spot for 2 months just to record this content, whether it's a young person, young creator trying to build a portfolio or just understanding that I honestly think it's such an untapped sport. We're not even like at the tip of the iceberg here. I really think there's so much more to powerlifting than what we're letting it be right now.
Oh yeah, and it all lies in the production value, you know? Like everyone's chat to friends and family and they're like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I do powerlifting. Oh, show me that. You show them like the meet on the stationary camera and it's just you lifting and they're not impressed, you know? But then let's say they ask you the same question and you show them you at an ab series meet where you show a Motion Masters video of you lifting. They don't even need to know what the weight on the bar is. They're like flames, the production value. That's awesome. You do that, you know? I think that's where we're going in 2024, where that's going to be the norm for meets. And that's so exciting.
There's actually 2 pictures that come to mind. One is a Motion Masters picture of Ian Benson, and he's just pulled his deadlift and he's like flexing. And then there's another one of Dave Richardson who's coming out for his third deadlift. It's a crowd, like somebody in the crowd took, and he's like doing this, like to get the crowd to cheer, and you see all the fists and just the silhouettes of the people and the flames behind Dave, and I was like, this looks like a Rammstein gig. This is incredible, like, and that's what I mean when I say like moments. And I love that you're kind of on that same wavelength. You kind of see for what it could be, and we're not so, like, this is the point. We don't need to appeal to people that are already into the sport. They already get it. They love it. It's what can we do to get more eyes on the sport? Even people that just want to follow it passively, just to keep an eye on what's going on. What's Melvin's next meet? Oh, Melvin's in there. Who's he going against? Oh, it's Melvin and Ken. Ken beat him last year at Nationals. That's going to be good. Yeah. What do you think then for you, right? So I know you're taking a little bit of a break from competing until next year. So what is the long-term plan for Melvin?
Long-term plan is to continue building my total, especially with conventional now that I'm switching over to it. I think I have a lot of untapped potential in that. Like looking into the next few years, when I'd picture me pulling 350 or whatever, I could never picture it being sumo. Like I was like, me pulling that, like it just couldn't happen. But now I'm going conventional. I think that avenue's opened up. So like 2024, I want to do Worlds and establish myself amongst the top dogs, you know? Then coming into 2025, I'd love to be at a point where I could be a Sheffield wildcard. We don't know what'll happen in 2025. USAPL could have something crazy going on in 2025 that might draw my attention. But like in my mind, 2025 is where I kind of break the national stage and like all eyes are on me kind of moment, that I've hopefully hit the 890 to 900 total barrier, you know? Like I divide like the 105's totals into a few different categories. I feel like an 800 to 825 total is like a D tier 105 internationally, which is a crazy statement to make. 825 to 850, B, 850 to 875, A, and then like 900 plus is like your S tier. I want to get to that A tier, 875 to 900 tier, you know, and then hopefully build and be able to face up against this like Anatoly or Ashton Ruska or whatever. That's where I want to go, which is crazy to talk about now, where my total is now at 815. But that's the vision, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know?
That is an awesome journey you're embarking on there, man. Like, I can only imagine, especially with the rate of progress you have made. I think the sky is the limit. But I had a couple of questions that came in on the question box on Instagram. I'm going to use those to kind of start like wrapping us up, because like I don't want to keep you here all day in the boiling hot primal studio. I don't know about you. I'm always roasting when I'm in here. Maybe I should untuck my t-shirt. However, somebody wanted to know, and this is like probably the most contentious question, is will Melvin ever go enhanced?
It's an interesting one. I don't see myself going enhanced for one reason is that I believe everything I want to achieve, I can do it naturally. So just simply there's not the need for it. Then there's also like the health complications that can happen. And then like I also have another point of like, which we come back to the categories where like I don't want to just have as much weight as humanly possible on my back. And if I do, I feel like there'd be an asterisk on it. If I do it with PEDs or with wraps or whatever, like if I squat 350, it's like, well, he's wearing wraps, you know, that he would probably squat less in sleeves, you know? So when I achieve something, when I hit 500 dots or 900 total, I want it to be undeniable by anyone, you know? So I don't see myself going down the route of PEDs. Like I listened to Eamon Hartford's 2 podcasts talking about it, and I completely agree with everything he says. If you're the kind of person who you have like a goal of like 1,000 kilos, 1,100 even, you just want like unsurmountable weight on your back or lifting it off the ground by any means necessary, I completely see why you'd go down that route.
I think with the PEDs conversation, it's a conversation I've had many times on this podcast with numerous people. Fair play to all of them as well for being as candid and open as they have been. I think the biggest thing about it is, from an outside perspective, from people listening, getting listener feedback, is if we just take the morality out of it, you know, because these guys aren't trying to lift in the IPF. They're lifting untested, they're competing untested. And so long as they're doing that, I don't think it's a moralistic standpoint. I do think it's a valid thing to bring up as like the long-term health implications of what these things are. Now, this is just as an aside, there is a 4-part podcast by a group called Barbell Medicine where they talk about testosterone, PEDs, and it's very, very good. And I would definitely advise anyone that's interested more in the topic, go and give that a listen if you've got the couple of hours to listen to all 4 episodes. But one thing they said stuck out to me a lot, that said low to moderate PED use, so low doses of PED use, testosterone in particular, doesn't really carry too many health complications for the average person. Like, I'm not saying that it's still a complication. You're still taking a synthetic hormone, but it's not as potentially detrimental to your health as people would think. However, people that are willing to engage in the use of PEDs tend to be people that will also participate in the use of recreational drugs, alcohol abuse, other potentially dangerous behaviors. So I think that's the idea. It's the proclivity to use PEDs is also a proclivity to engage in other habits that would be more dangerous and damaging.
I think that's a great point. I've never even thought about that. Like, the people do use PEDs, like, they want the most intense experience, regardless of like what that entails. They want the most intense powerlifting experience. They want to throw on the wraps, go on PEDs, and squat a crazy weight. If they're at a festival, they want to take the best pill to give the best experience. You know, that's definitely a great point. And a spin-off to that I want to talk about I saw recently was bans in the IPF with PEDs. I saw a few stories. Jay Farrington reposted one of them about a Canadian guy who got banned for taking like tren and tests and everything in a IPF meet, and he got a 3-year ban. And then we have an Irish lifter who recently got a ban for like there was a substance in a pre-workout they took
that they were unaware of.
They're unaware of, and they got a how long ban was it? A 2-year ban. That's insane to me that a guy can knowingly take every drug under the sun, compete against tested people, and he only gets 1 extra year, and then he can come back. I don't see how you could allow that in your sport, in my opinion. How you could do that first lifter so wrongly that they were unaware of it, and they weren't going to lift 100 more kilos because of that.
Well, I just on that, because there's people that know what we're talking about and there's people that don't know. I don't want to reveal the details of who the lifter is. That's absolutely, it's not for, the public don't need to necessarily know. But the fact of the matter is whatever the circumstances are, a lifter took a pre-workout they don't normally take, fair enough, for whatever the motivations were, for a meet. Under the advisement of somebody else who had already checked and allegedly it was all good. And it just so happened that there was an ingredient in the pre-workout that the ingredient didn't read as a banned substance, but this ingredient has another name or can be digested in such a way that it becomes this substance that is banned. And whatever circumstances came about, this was present in after testing. This is a great lifter, obviously, so they were naturally selected for testing. And the circumstances were explained quite diligently that it was a mistake. This is a misunderstanding. Fair enough. I can understand the likes of striking records or nullifying medals and things like that. But I think to ban somebody for what was provably an accident for that long.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be some kind of like, I don't know, subjectivity the word, but like or contextuality to each ban.
Oh, there should be, completely.
Definitely.
They all need to be investigated on an individual level.
And like I know my coach Alex posted a story then asking like, should people who are like taking PEDs like knowingly and strong ones in a test fed even be allowed to come back? And I don't think they should.
No, I agree.
That's a insane offense that undermines the legitimacy of the sport and your rivals. There's been times where people have come second at world championships, and the guy who came first ended up getting popped. And the second guy is now he's now the new champion, but it's not the same.
Not at all.
If you walk onto a stage, you come second, you think the better man's won, and he gets popped after the fact, and you're having to be first. it's a horrible feeling.
You're being handed tarnished gold.
Exactly.
Like, because no matter what, no one will say, "Oh yeah, he won." They'll say, "Yeah, did you hear about your man that got popped?" The story about that championship, that medal, that placement will always be that person got popped. Not that you won because you were the better man.
That's it. And if this was your first chance to win a world championships and you came second, that day, even if you're handed the win after the fact, you'll still remember on that day that you lost. You felt like a loser, whatever, you know? So, yeah, in terms of PEDs in tested sports, those people should get complete lifelong bans, you know?
Well, they've kind of completely undermined the point.
Yeah.
Like, the thing is that this is, and again, the last thing I really want to say on that particular case, because I think it's too close to home, you know what I mean, is we take the example of the guy that got popped who was running Tren, right? Trenbolone, a steroid, basically, very knowingly so. So there's a difference between somebody that competes tested and goes, I am going to do literally the number one poster child for it. This is what you're not meant to do in tested federations. I'm going to do that and just chance my arm, right?
Yeah.
And still went for the drug test and all, God help him, right? Versus I am competing untested because I think, or tested, sorry, because I think this is the best representation of me and the sport and the version of the sport I want to compete in. Here's a mistake where I took something that they sell over the counter, a fucking pre-workout that people take when they go to the gym to lift weights. And it just so happened that something on the label was not named correctly. And this led to a very similar ban. That to me is, I think it's very tone deaf, is the way I put it.
For
like,
sure.
The guy, and again, just personal opinion, I don't know all the ins and outs and rules and regulations and all that. I'm not going to pretend I do. I did that like 2-hour exam thing you have to do before I went to Westons. And I was like, I'm in fucking school to go lift weights. But I still did it, all right? So fair enough. I get the motivations behind it for upholding clean sport. But this guy knowingly committed all these offenses in a tested federation, got stung. Man, you're out. Like, let's be honest. You're gone, right? You're out. Go lift untested. Those options exist to a high standard. Go lift at the App Series. Take all the training you want. This other lifter did not knowingly go against the regulations of the sport, right? No one injected any fucking Trenbolone. No one took any orals. No one snorted a line of cocaine before they went out for deadlifts, right? A pre-workout was taken. And I really think that, like, I think I can't overstate that. Like, I understand nullifying that competition that it happened in.
Yeah, that's it. That's where I'd leave it.
I would personally say that's enough.
Yeah.
But if you're going to be a bit of a stick up your ass about it, maybe say the duration of the rest of the year you are not allowed to compete. I wouldn't even call it a ban. It's a suspension. A suspension from competition for the remainder of 2023. That would be the extent I would take. And then look, I'm not on a committee.
Yeah.
I'm not intimately familiar with the rule book, and I hold my hands up when I say that. But I'm just saying, when we have that context and we have this context, I think, logic would dictate that one offense does not look like the other.
No, I agree.
So the last question I have for Melvin, right, is, and this was a question that came in. So when you're not, dropping bars on your head and you're not repping out other people's submaxes, what is a day in the life of Melvin?
So at the moment, a day in the life of Melvin is like, just at the moment, trying to focus on building my career outside the gym. I'm in the process of trying to transition from the fitness industry to the business and finance industry, like business analytics to be exact. I did like a course on it and all of that. At the moment, I work in a leisure center as like a PT administrator, that sort of stuff, and I'm bringing those business skills into it. So yeah, my whole free time at the minute is just focus on making that move, because I think it's important for powerlifters to not just like solely be focused on their powerlifting career. That's their everything. Because you never know when you won't be able to do that thing. You get an injury, a lockdown could happen like what happened before. Anything could happen that could stop you from powerlifting. And all of a sudden, this thing where you define your success, your joy, whatever, is gone. So I'm trying to build my life outside of powerlifting through this avenue of business analytics and my work career. And let's say when I get like an interview and it goes well, I feel successful and that happens, And when I get into that field and I'm flourishing in it, now I'm not just Melvin the powerlifter. I have this really fun career and well-paying career that I'm into as well. Outside of that, like I'm at home and I'm watching anime and playing games, the contentious anime.
What's the anime at the moment you're watching?
At the minute, there's one with a crazy name, Jujutsu Kaisen.
I'm not going to try and repeat it, but I'm sure there's people that know what it is.
I won't go into depth with it because it's too confusing. We'll be here for another episode. But so watching anime, building my career, spending time at home, that's my free time,
Few cans on the weekend and a
few cans on the weekend, the main thing.
Sounds super chill, man. Do you know what, though? I think if you do get into the new career you're getting into, I think you're going to be one of those people like that. I am unnecessarily jacked for the career that I'm in. You're going to be going to work in like a shirt and slacks and be like busting out of it.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, like the shirts and slacks, it's just not for me. It would look so comical, but I feel like that's what has to be done.
Yeah. Like, man, this t-shirt we gave when you came in from the sponsor, the concept, I'm sure everyone on the YouTube can see it, man. They're meant to be oversized, man. You're not meant to be showing that much muscle through those things. You're gonna look massive in the shirt and the slacks. But hey, man, thank you very much for coming on and giving me some of your time. Absolutely. We'll have to do it again. I actually have your coach on next.
Brilliant.
Alex Kremen's coming to the
Tune in, guys.
All right. Thanks, Melvin.
No problem.